Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Diane Hinds. She is an entertainment publicist, and she is also an author. And we learn about the untold history of Trinidad. We learn about colonialism. We'll talk about identity and also storytelling. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Diane. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn, as I said, we'll talk about colonialism and identity, talk about Trinidad's hidden history. But before that, let's understand a bit about your journey, Diane, so that people know who they are listening to.
So, my journey in a nutshell, both my parents are from Trinidad. They grew up almost as neighbors. And my father, from the age of 10, always knew that he wanted to serve God. So when he and my mother married, had my eldest brother decided to come to the UK so that he could attend theological college. And he did. And having been ordained, he decided that he wanted to go back to Trinidad and minister. So he uprooted us all in 1975 and took us to Trinidad, which was a huge culture shock for me in particular. But it proved to be an interesting opportunity because my eyes just opened in a way that standard education didn't give me. You know, when I was in the UK attending school, we were learning about the British kings and queens and British history. But when we went to Trinidad, I was learning about something else. I was learning about the slave trade. And I thought all this was hugely exciting. My mother used to make mention bits of history. For instance, she mentioned about a Louisa Calderon, and this piqued my interest. And I didn't know that I was actually absorbing a lot of information at the time that I would put into a book. So after 4 years, my father decided that he wanted to come back. My education in particular suffered. I'm not dyslexic, but I'm more of a visual learner. And I had to repeat my 5th year at the time. So when I left school and college, I realized that, the real world was very interesting. And I found my niche as a PR, as a publicist. In those days, it predated the internet. So I'm used to picking up the phone to people like you and saying, AJ, I've got this interesting story and client. Are you interested? And you will say either yes or no. But then we get the internet and everything's mediated. So I decided I wanted to go to university and learn more. And at the same time, I had a client called Anne Perry and got to know her agent very well. Anne was a client for about 14 years or so. And her agent and I used to go out and have lunch every 2 months or go and see the cinema. And one Christmas, she gave me an A5 red moleskin book, 2 pens, and a little note that read, "Think about it, Diane. Love, Meg. Kiss, kiss." So back in the February, I had lunch with her and I said, "Look, Meg, I don't get this. What do you mean?" She said, "When we last met, we were talking about you writing." I said, "How can I even begin to think that I write when I work with an international New York Times best-selling writer? No way." Anyway, I had this little gem of an idea. He emailed it to Meg and she said, "Tell me more." So that was the start of my writing process. And I have to say, it's been hugely exciting. So having written book 1, she said, "Look, you've got 2 books or 3 books here." So I decided that I wanted my protagonist in what is now book 2, her ancestor, to be the protagonist in book 1, which the book starts from about 1770 in Trinidad. And it tells a story about an island that whenever you think about films that are made to do with the slave trade or books, they are predominantly set in America or the UK. But Trinidad's story is unique. And I think it needs telling again to a fresh audience. So that's how it came to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what is it that you want to, tell the world about Trinidad? Many people go there, many people visit there. It's a nice place. They go as a tourist and for whatever. It is also known for cricket and so many things. So, I just want to understand what is it that people go but do not know? What is it that you want to tell the
I think
world?
people go because obviously the climate is really nice. It's beautiful. The island's very, very beautiful. We've got the pitch lake there that I think Sir Walter Raleigh used to caulk his boat at the time. And fresh fruit, birds, tropical birds, etc. Spiders as well. But I don't think people appreciate the history. And I think the history is one that we shouldn't lose because, when I was doing my research for it, at the time it had when I'm writing the book, it had a Spanish governor, Chacon, who, because this is also during the slave trade, had written a code noir that generally protected the slaves. So the plantation owners weren't allowed to beat them, and they were respected. They had to be respected and treated better until our British governor came along and did away with that. Feels a bit like, what's happening in the world at the moment. Similarities, if you know what I mean. And I just think that, from my research, it also suggested that, the slaves were better treated in Trinidad, and it didn't have the uprisings as such like Jamaica or Haiti, and the way that, myself, I've got French, Spanish, Irish, Portuguese, and Dutch blood, thanks to my parents, thanks to, their parents as well. It's a fascinating melting pot of culture and lifestyle and food in particular. So there's more than just what people see when they go on vacation. There's a lot of history there that's worth exploring.
Right. Any particular moment in Trinidad's history that people should know about, but it gets overlooked in for whatever reason it
Well,
is?
yes, at the time, Trinidad, it was known as the Spanish Antilles. It was fought over by the French and the Brits. And obviously, at the time, the Brits took control of the island. The Brits had arrived with their ships to go into battle with the Spanish in order to take control of Spain. And there was very little pushback from Spain. It's believed that the Spanish set fire to their own ships in just outside Port of Spain in the Bocas. So there was very little resistance. And even when the Brits came on shore, many people had fled inland. Excuse me. So there was very little resistance from the Spanish. And Sir Ralph Abercrombie installed, and I've forgotten his name, the British governor, to take control of the island. So that was an interesting era in the island's life. It'd been Spanish for many, many years. But to then become a colony of Britain at that particular time, and to see how it was almost relinquished with ease by the Spanish, not many people would realize that or know that story.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's look at your book now, Conquerabia, the struggle for identity. Help us
What a copy
understand.
here.
Means, yes, yes. Why is it not very clear?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably, I
Okay,
don't know.
okay, no problem,
No
no problem.
problem at all. So
Yeah.
you are
So
asking, why is it?
yeah. So I want to understand to write a book like this, forget about everything else. First, you can be, you can be in a very difficult position because you have got relationship with Trinidad, you have also relationship with Britain. So how do you look at a book like this? Did you face any such dilemma? How to present it and
Do
and
you know
present
what?
things in facts and no fiction?
Dilemma. I think there is, because of the BLM movement, I think there is a little bit of resistance to it. I understand that. I'm not criticizing it. I think people have had enough of seeing that the statues and what have you have been pulled down in the UK, particularly Colston's statue in Bristol that was pulled down and it ended up in the river. Stories like this are quite cyclical. And I think at the moment, I want to focus on the positive aspects of what Britain brought to Trinidad, the education as well as the laws. For a period of time, Trinidad, when it became Trinidad, retained a lot of the Spanish laws. But, when people travel and immerse themselves into culture, things change. And I always think for the better. I always hope for the better. I was born in the UK. I absolutely love, the UK. I remember last November, I was invited to meet His Excellency, the High Commissioner for Trinidad and Tobago here in London. And he looked at me and he said, I can't believe you've written this book, having only spent 4 years there. But it was a passion project because I felt so keenly that the story needs to be told to a new audience. And the research, I started it when I was doing my master's. So had I not done my master's, I don't think I might have been able to have written the book, because the master's taught me about the research. It taught me about, crediting other people's work and so forth. And it's the discipline. There has been many a time when I cried thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. But I have to credit my editor, Hanley, who's based in Chicago, who told me as soon as I shared the book with her, feeling rather embarrassed, she said to me, Diane, writers write unconsciously, editors edit consciously. And that made sense to me at the time, because I then wasn't ashamed of sending her my manuscript in the state that it was, because she helped me pull it together like a jigsaw puzzle to make a story of it.
Absolutely. So, how have you dealt all these things from both someone who was born in Britain and someone who has a history from Trinidad? How did you balance it? How have you dealt things in your book? Have you dealt it as fiction? Is it all about history? That's the thing I want to know for the audience.
So that's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking that. It's I've used the medium of fiction to tell some true stories. Some of the characters there are based on real people, but the story about identity, I felt it easier to use fictional characters to establish the identity. Like my protagonist is born of a plantation owner. And this came to me because when I had a history class in Trinidad, my very first history class, my history teacher, lovely lady, looked at me, pointed at me, and she said, Diane, because of your light skin, you would be working as a domestic in the house. So that stayed with me. I wanted my protagonist to be born of a plantation owner, to have a certain privilege of being able to work in the house and not on the land, and to show the difference of privilege from being lighter skinned. It happens. It still happens in this day and age. And identity, because she's figuring out her identity, who she is. The island is also figuring out its identity because it's moved from the Spanish Antilles to Trinidad, but there is a melting pot of people because the mobility at the time, people were moving around the world and opportunities were made available for people to prospect. So you've got French, Dutch, Irish, all sorts of people making lives for themselves in Trinidad. So it's, for me, even though it's set in the era of the slave trade, there's a certain glamour about it. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, Diane. One more thing I want to understand is that from the point of Trinidad, how do people look at their past? Do they look at it as victim of the past or the past as passage of time, that this is how it can happen, and just it happened that way?
For me, I would like to say passage of time, but I think that's the optimist in me. I don't particularly know, but I know that some people do have issues with what happened in the 18th century, in the 400-year period, the Middle Passage, etc. But I would like to think that, I would not have certain privileges had my parents not migrated here to the UK and given me a lifestyle and education that, and particularly medical, because, being born here, the youngest of six with sickle cell, I would like to think that, being born and brought up here, I've had the benefit of the NHS, and I've made it to 61, 62 this month. Would I have had such benefit in Trinidad? I would like to think so, but I don't know for sure. So I would like to think that on the whole, people embrace who they are and look at the past with a sense of, yes, it happened. Yes, we have come to terms with it to a certain extent, but it's made me in particular who I am and what I am. That's got to be a benefit. We can't rewrite the history, although some people would like to, which is another reason I felt that this story was so empowering for me to tell and not let people forget about certain aspects of our history.
Absolutely, absolutely, Diane. So, who is this book for? Is it for people in Trinidad, or is it for people in Britain to know how this whole thing looks like after so many years?
I would say it's for readers, particularly readers of history. I wouldn't call it a romance novel. I don't think I can write romance, but I think there is an element of romance about the whole story. I would like to think it's about, it's aimed at young adults as well, because my protagonist grows up as a young slave, as I said, as a domestic in a house, so she has certain privileges. And it's aimed at people who are also struggling with their identity. I had I was reacquainted with my niece, my twin, because we look so alike. And she said to me, there is no national day for mixed race people. That got me thinking. And she and I got talking, and I said, but do you know there is a patron saint for mixed race people called Michael Porras, I think it is, dated about 1642 or something like that. She didn't know that. But it's about having these conversations and sharing our thoughts and ideas and realizing that, we are a blessing. We have certain benefits that other people don't, purely because of the way in which we were born. I embrace my mixed heritage and culture because I think I have a lot more than other people who are just born and brought up in one particular country don't necessarily have, because they're not educated, they don't read, etc.
Absolutely, absolutely, Diane. So, what was the most challenging part when you wrote this book?
The rewrites. It was a hell of a time. And oh my Lord, you can go through the book so many times, but you also become word blind. And I had somebody ring me up and, they bought the book, and I'm so grateful that they bought the book. But I was thinking that it would be nice, because they're an avid reader, that they would talk about the characters or the dialogue or something like that. But no, they focused on the typos in the book, So the rewrites, you can, working with Anne Perry as well taught me this, that it's important to have the rewrites, but you've got to accept it. There are going to be some typos in the book. You're not a magician, so you got to live with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you come from a PR background, and writing a novel can be very challenging. Means, how did you work this out, especially long form writing for and I guess this is the first book, or
well, this is book 2, because
book
remember,
two.
book 1 is now book 2. So I had to
Right.
go all the way back in order to create the story and the story arc. And as I said, I started this when I was doing my master's, so that took priority. But then again, I would have moments when I would write, and I would go for months when I wouldn't write. I had an incident in I was on vacation in Italy, in Tuscany, and the Bastille Day incident happened in France, and that inspired me to write. So I had to quickly get onto the laptop and just focus and just write, and I could go back and edit it. Another incident that inspired something in the story was I was in New Jersey for bat mitzvah, and some acquaintances that I'd known for about 30 years looked at me, because we were in a very wealthy area of New Jersey, looked at me and said, would you like to live around here? But you couldn't really, could you? Something like that, they said to me. That upset me. But I used that in the book to tell the difference about privilege, a different kind of privilege, you know? So it's having those moments of thinking, I can't do this, I can't write it, I haven't got an idea, to going to the National Archive here in Kew Gardens and handling those documents from the late 18th century with white gloves and thinking, no, this is your history. That's fueling me even more to say, you've got to get on with this. This is a story that needs to be told, even from my own perspective, you know, to thinking that present day situations are still informing the story and things that could have happened hundreds of years ago.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much to learn from you about Trinidad, about its history, and about the present, and how it all relates to colonialism, identity, and storytelling. So much things to know. So, for those people who would want to connect with you and also get your book, what's the best way for them to do so?
So the easiest thing for people to do is to go to my website, dianehindswrites.com. And in that site, there are links to my social media and to platforms where they can get hold of the book.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining.
Thank you for having me.